Hello, Rebels. Great to be with you. Great to finally be starting abnormal psychology. Hopefully, as we go through this unit, you'll have questions answered about various disorders that you're interested in. I trust that you watched the Ruby Wax video, What's So Funny About Mental Illness. And the reason I had you start with this is because I know we know that there's a stigma attached to mental illness, and I wanted us to be sensitive to that and sensitive to the fact that we do not know everyone's story in our class. And so I would like us to be sensitive to how we talk about, share information about mental illness, and recognize that at some point all of us will have been, are, or will experience either some form of mental illness ourselves, or it will touch someone we care about. And I think we need to be sensitive to that. I hope that when this is all said and done, not only do you know more about abnormal psychology, but you will be advocates for eliminating the stigma, that you will be people who can stand up for the rights of people with mental illness, and you can speak up and be the face of Christ to those who suffer. So let's get started. At some point in the discussion board, I'd like you to write down up to 3 questions you want answered about any disorder of interest. And if we haven't covered it by the time we're done covering each of the disorders we're going to talk about, I will try to get you an answer. So if you have any questions, please go to the discussion board and write them there. How do we define psychological disorders? So first thing we need to understand is that at some point we all think and feel and act in ways that some people might see as abnormal. The question is, what's the difference between that and where does it cross over from that to being a disorder? So just to put a spotlight on the issue and the prevalence of the issue, from 2018 statistics from the WHO tell us that 300 million people suffer from depression, 60 million from bipolar disorder, and 23 million from schizophrenia. In low and middle income countries, pretty much almost everybody, between 76% and 85% of those who suffer from mental illness receive no treatment whatsoever. And in high-income countries, between 35% and 50% receive no treatment. Mental health in the United States, statistics say that 1 in 5 American adults will have a diagnosable mental health condition in any given year. And that 50% of Americans at some time in their life will meet the criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition, and half of those people develop those conditions by the age of 14. How do we define psychological disorders? So this you already read about in the module you were supposed to be taking notes on over the weekend. Patterns of thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that are 3 things: deviant, distressful, dysfunctional. 3 Ds: deviant, distressful, dysfunctional. Good old Emily Dickinson: assent, agree, and you are sane. Demur, you're straightaway dangerous and handled with a chain. So again, in our society, different can be dangerous, but is different a disorder? Let's talk about that. So deviant. Standards of deviant behavior can vary by context and culture. What one group considers deviant, another group could not. For example, in wartime, mass killing may be viewed as heroic. ADHD. Some children maybe just aren't suited for a typical classroom environment. It's a personality trait issue. Olympians deviate from the norm. Michael Phelps has an extraordinarily wide wingspan, fingertip to fingertip. That's deviant. That's what makes him an incredible swimmer. He's deviant. We don't think that's a problem. In fact, we honor him. Distressful needs to be the second quality. So for deviant behavior to be considered disordered, it must be distressful as well. What does that mean? The person recognizes their thoughts and or behaviors cause them stress and concern. Dysfunctional. Deviant and distressful behaviors are more likely to be considered disordered. So again, we need that third D, when they lead to harmful dysfunction. That means the behavior has to impair the person's life in some way. So let's look at an example. A lawyer feels the need to wash his hands 100 times a day. As a result, he has little time to meet with clients, and his colleagues are questioning his competence. He has been warned that he is about to lose his job. So where's the deviance? Clearly, washing one's hands 100 times a day is a deviant behavior. Most people do not engage in that kind of behavior. Is it distressful? Second quality. People are questioning his competence. He knows he's having little time to meet with clients. That's got to be causing him distress. And then is it dysfunctional? Certainly, because he's about to lose his job. He cannot function in his job in a way that allows him to be successful. So deviant, distressful, dysfunctional. Understanding psychological disorders. So prior to the 18th century, it was believed that the mentally ill were possessed by demons, or were affected by the stars, or had godlike powers. And as a result, they were caged, they were beaten, they were burned at the stake, body parts were removed, they were given animal blood, all kinds of treatments to try to get rid of these demons. In the late 18th century, Philip Pinel insisted it was a sickness of the mind, and he started to advocate for humane treatment. And the reason for this was because syphilis, a disease they discovered, infected the brain and caused madness. So now they were making a connection between madness and disease. And so a medical model came into existence, and instead of it being called madness, we get the term mental illness that was diagnosed based on symptoms and treated with therapy, shifting the terms to medical terms. Today, obviously, we have the biopsychosocial approach. Nothing new there, you guys know this. What are the biological influences? Evolution, genetics, brain structure, chemistry. What are the psychological influences? Stress, trauma, learned helplessness, mood-related perceptions, memories, and then what are the social cultural influences? Roles, expectations, definitions of what is normal and what is disordered. So each disorder that we're going to talk about, we will be looking at those three areas. How do we classify psychological disorders? So the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is the current classification, the current reference doctors look to diagnose. It is used by clinicians to diagnose mental disorders. So people come in for testing, for assessment, and then clinicians look through the DSM to find whether or not or how people's symptoms line up with particular disorders. And I will be posting an example of the DSM-5 and what it looks like and what the symptoms are for various disorders just for you to see. So what are the risk factors in childhood for mental illness? Genetics. Low IQ and or learning disabilities, which hopefully makes sense. Development delays. So back when we talked about development, they look at what kind of milestones are children supposed to be reaching cognitively as well as physically, and look for delays. Communication difficulties. I think we could understand the stress behind that, talking later than normal, issues with speech impediments, physical illness, academic failure, and low self-esteem. Doesn't mean that a child may ultimately have a mental illness, but these are the risk factors that predispose them to one down the line. What are the protective factors? What things in a child's biology and environment help them avoid mental disorders? Secure attachment, we've talked about that, having reliable, trusted caregivers, feeling safe. Good communication skills, being able to articulate one's needs and desires. Having an internal locus of control, so we've talked about that too in our motivation unit and the last unit. Being able to feel like we have control over what happens to us and we're not just victims of outside forces. Positive attitude, experiences of success and achievement, obviously building high self-esteem. And a capacity to reflect, a capacity to be able to evaluate, look inward, make decisions, make changes in one's life. Family risk factors. Family disharmony or breakup obviously can be an issue. Inconsistent discipline style, which leads to not feeling safe, not feeling like we have control over our environment and what happens to us. Parents with mental illness or substance abuse, genetic component there, as well as just the environment of being in an environment where the parents are unstable. Emotional abuse, parent criminality or alcoholism, obviously leading to parent absence, and death and loss. All risk factors. Again, risk factors doesn't mean someone will suffer from mental illness, but is a factor. Protective factors. Family harmony and stability, supportive parenting, strong family values, affection, so that contact comfort we talked about in development, clear, consistent discipline, again, leading to a sense of safety. You can predict, you know what's going to happen. Support for education. The more knowledge we have, the easier it is for being able to do that reflection that was in the last section, being able to understand our environment, have control over our environment. School risk factors. Bullying, discrimination, breakdown in or lack of positive friendships, deviant peer influences, peer pressure, poor pupil to teacher relationships. Obviously, all of those things make one insecure. Lack of safety, lack of connection to people can put us at risk. School protective factors. Positive school climate that enhances belonging and connectedness. Obviously, this is something we're concerned about right now during this e-learning, trying to keep people connected, help us feel like we belong, keep us connected to our friends, to our teachers. Clear policies on behavior and bullying. Again, that sense of safety. You know what to expect. You understand. You may not like it, but you understand what the consequences are, what the discipline are, and you know people are looking out for you. An open door policy for students to raise problems. Again, feeling like we have some sense of control over our environment. and then a whole school approach to promoting good mental health.